With Monster Hunter Wilds on the horizon, we're going back to Monster Hunter World to relive some of the best builds and hunts of the game. So with that, I'm Darcblade with one of the greatest builds for the Charge Blade in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now each episode is dedicated to just one build and are slightly different from the builds that are featured in the best of the best build video series. They tend to focus on either pure damage, defense, or some other niche aspect of the weapon. But if you find these videos helpful or informative or even entertaining, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it will allow me to make more content like this, not only for Monster Hunter World but also the upcoming Monster Hunter Wilds. Now in today's video, we're looking at a build for the Charge Blade, otherwise known as the Offensive Guard build. Now this build is centered all around the Offensive Guard skill, as this can be activated through the various guard points that the Charge Blade has available to it. After which we'll get a attack bonus percentage increase, which allows us to perform super amped elemental discharges that hit incredibly hard. So for this build you'll need the following. First of all, you'll need the Dragon Head Alpha, then the Dragon Hide Beta, the Dragon Claws Beta, the Dragon Barbs Alpha, and the Kulvtruff Wrath Beta. As for the charm, I'm using the Challenger charm, and for my weapon I'm using the True Fatalis Charger. This is the Fatalis Charge Blade. This has a health regen augmentation attached to it and an attack increase augmentation attached to it. You can replace this with other weapons if you so wish, so long as they have impact files and a fairly high raw attack. As for your mantles and specialist tools, go with what you personally prefer to use. I'm using the Rocksteady and Temporal Mantle. Now as for the decorations, unfortunately this is a decoration heavy build, so you'll need the following. First of all, you'll need attack decorations to get attack boost to level 7. I've then gone for an optional jump-in jewel. This can be replaced if you so wish, and I would recommend if you are playing in a group, maybe consider taking a diversion jewel. This would give you the provoker skill and cause monsters to attack you more than your allies, meaning that you can trigger offensive guard more often and thus getting that attack boost. I've then gone for a shield jewel for pointing guard up, magazine jewel for capacity boost, artillery jewels to max out the artillery skill, a challenger jewel to max out agitator, guardian jewels for the offensive guard skill, a critical jewel to max out crit boost, protection jewels for a few points in divine blessing, and phoenix jewels to max out coalescence. I decided to go with coalescence over peak performance, as I tend to find it's easier to trigger. As for the decorations on your mantles, I've gone for extra protection decorations to get Divine Blessing even higher when we're wearing the Rocksteady mantle, and expert decorations when we're wearing the Temporal mantle. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with 200 health and 200 stamina, regardless of if you've eaten any food at the canteen, and this also takes into account that we don't have health boost as well. This is thanks to the Fatalis set bonus, which we'll talk about a bit later. You'll also have a raw attack of 1372, which can be higher when certain buffs are active. You have a reasonable amount of purple and white sharpness. You have no affinity, but with weakness exploit and agitator this can be at least 75%. You have a dragon rating of 150 with high elder seal, and you'll have impact files. Impact files deal fixed damage against monsters based off of the artillery skill and your raw attack. As it's fixed damage, it means they cannot crit, which is one of the reasons we haven't gone for a higher base affinity. As for your defense, you have a strong defense of 1117, that is strong against thunder and water, neutral against fire, but unfortunately weak to ice and especially dragon. So as for the skills, first of all you'll have attack boost at level 7, increasing the raw attack of our build, and at level 4 or above grants us a 5% base affinity. Even if you can't get attack boost to level 7, get it to at least level 4. Next up you have Agitator at level 7, which is a skill, a buff that kicks in whenever a monster becomes enraged. When this happens, you'll gain increased raw attack and base affinity. And as you can easily control when a monster becomes enraged thanks to the whole flinch shot mechanic in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, Agitator is easy to activate. You'll then have Artillery at level 5, increasing the damage of our file bursts with the Charge Blade. Remember that artillery only affects impact file charge blades, not the elemental file charge blades. You'll then have stun resistance at level 2, preventing all stun effects against the hunter. This is a byproduct of the armor, but it's still a useful quality of life skill. You'll then have critical eye at level 3, which can be potentially level 5 when we're wearing the temporal mantle. Critical eye is a skill that increases the base affinity of a build, and in the case of this build, it counters the negative affinity found on the True Fatalis Charger. You'll then have Critical Boost at level 3, a skill that grants us increased damage whenever our attacks crit a monster, but only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. This also does not apply to the file bursts in the case of the Charge Blade. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3, which is a skill that grants us up to 50% affinity when we're attacking monster weak points. But to gain that full 50% bonus affinity, we have to make sure that those weak points are tenderized through Clutch Claw attacks first. You'll then have Guard at level 3. Now Guard at level 3 could be considered Guard at level 4 once we've had a powered up shield. This basically allows us to guard point a lot of attacks, as well as blocking attacks normally with minimal knockback, but it also reduces the stamina consumption for actually blocking said attacks. You can invest more points into guard if you so wish, the choice is up to you. Anyway, next up is Divine Blessing at level 3, which can be potentially level 5 when we're wearing the Rocksteady mantle. Divine Blessing is a useful defensive skill that gives us a chance at taking reduced damage should we take a hit from a monster. You'll then have Offensive Guard at level 3, which is the namesake of this build. Offensive Guard is a skill that when we perfectly time a block, will gain a percentage increase to our raw attack. And like I said, the Charge Blade is perfect for when it comes to guard points, which are moves and abilities that allow you to pretty much automatically block an attack, and if done right, allows you to perform follow-up attacks that will immediately have that offensive guard attack increase bonus attached to them. But remember, timing is everything with this, and sometimes if you're getting too cocky or you misread an attack, you can end up causing problems for yourself on a hunt. Anyway, next up is Coalescence at level 3, a skill that when we remove a blight or ailment from our hunter, it will grant us increased raw attack, elemental attack, or ailment damage. And as a lot of the high tier monsters do inflict ailments against the hunter, Coalescence is very useful. A recommendation if you don't like Coalescence is to replace this with Peak Performance, but the choice is up to you. Peak Performance means you'll gain increased raw attack whenever you have full health. Next up is Capacity Boost at level 1, an essential skill for the Charge Blade that allows us to increase the amount of files we have, going from 5 to 6. This allows for more file bursts, a longer charged up shield, so on and so forth. Like I said, it's an essential skill for the Charge Blade. Next up is Evade Window at level 1, a byproduct of the armor we're wearing. We're not really going for dodging attacks, and that's where Evade Window would come into play, as it grants us increased invincibility frames when we perform dodges and hops and such. But because we want to try to trigger offensive guard as much as possible, we want to be blocking attacks, not dodging them. That's why I haven't invested more points into Evade Window. Next up though is Evade Extender at level 1, which increases the distance at which we dodge and evade and such. Like I said, this is an optional skill, you can drop this if you wanted to, replacing the jumping decoration. This is just basically a quality of life skill that I tend to use on my builds of late, as not only does it allow me to get out of the way, even though I just mentioned that we don't really want to get out of the way of attacks as we want to trigger offensive guard, but it also allows me to close the gap on monsters when they've run away. And then finally you'll have Guard Up at level 1. Guard Up is a skill that allows us to block unblockable attacks, and as this build is all about blocking and triggering offensive guard, we want Guard Up to ensure we can survive some of the harder hitting attacks from monsters. This doesn't make us immune to certain scripted attacks, such as the Escation Judgment from Alatreon, but it is still an essential skill for this build in my opinion. Now as for the set bonuses, you have two of them, both tied to the Fatalis legend. For wearing 2 pieces of the Fatalis armor, you're granted the Inheritance bonus, which allows certain skills to go past their level cap, such as Agitator, allowing us to get it from level 5 to level 7. And then for wearing 4 pieces, you have the Transcendence set bonus, which grants us 200 health and 200 stamina, regardless of if we've eaten at the canteen or not. This also eliminates the need for the health boost skill, and this also will persist through death. On top of that, it also grants us the True Razor Sharp skill, severely reducing the amount of sharpness lost when we're attacking monsters. So there we have it, that is the offensive guard build for the Charge Blade. But every build out there, even the best of the best and greatest builds, they all come with pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. When it comes to the offensive guard Charge Blade build, the biggest pro is its burst damage potential. Should you time your guard points correctly, you get a massive percentage bonus on top of the other raw attack skills, which afterwards when we perform our guard reaction attacks, such as the Super Amped Elemental Discharge, they will hit incredibly hard. Which brings us on to the second pro, which is that this build can still get away with using Savage Axe mode quite effectively and dishing out efficient damage. This is thanks to the sheer amount of DPS skills we have on this build. And then finally for the pros, this build can be used against pretty much any monster in the game, as it's a raw attack focused build that focuses on impact files, meaning that we don't really have to take into account a monster's elemental or ailment weaknesses. There are a few exceptions to this, but for the most part, you can use this against any monster in the game. But there are cons. The 2 biggest cons for this build include the fact that timing is everything with this build. As some of your guard reaction attacks have such long animations like the super amped elemental discharge, you have to know when to commit to these attacks, otherwise you're going to end up trading with the monster or just getting hit. And the other con for this build is, unfortunately, it does lack evasion skills, so for players who like to dodge, this may not be the build for them, as it's more focused on guarding against attacks than getting out of the way of them. But if you're looking for a fun way to use the Darcblade and you love guard reactions and guard counters, as well as performing the super amped elemental discharge, then I would strongly recommend this build to you. Like I said though, as long as you can get past the whole timing aspect of your attacks and not overcommitting to your attacks that have long animations, you'll find a very satisfying build in your hands that you can take against pretty much any monster in the game. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you the offensive guard Darcblade build in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.